My son-in-law just pulled me aside at his big gallery show and called me a backward hick in French, thinking I wouldn't catch it. I'm Raymond Cooper, and Griffin figured I was too dumb to understand when he laughed to his fancy art friends that my gift was worthless junk from a tone-deaf old geezer, but the sheet music I handed him wasn't junk. It was an unpublished Debussy manuscript valued at $890,000, and Griffin had zero clue that his little insult just lit a fuse he couldn't put out. See, Griffin made 3 huge mistakes that night. 1, he thought I don't speak French. 2, he thought I know zip about classical music. 3, he thought I'm just some working-class nobody who wandered into his high society bubble. He was dead wrong on every count. Catastrophically wrong. What happened next didn't just expose his arrogance. It blew apart everything he believed about his family's worst tragedy. If you're liking this, smash that subscribe button and comment where you're watching from, because it's about to get heavy. Let me rewind and explain how I ended up here. 3 years back, when Griffin married my daughter Sarah, I made a call that probably saved our family. I chose to hide who I really am. Griffin had just lost his little sister Sophie in a car wreck. She was 19, a piano prodigy at Manhattan School of Music, and losing her crushed him. He couldn't even hear classical music anymore without falling apart. Anything that reminded him of her talent, her dreams, her future, it was poison to him. So when Sarah brought home this shattered, young guy trying to start over in the art world, as far from music as possible, I decided right then I wouldn't tell him I'm Professor Raymond Cooper, retired after 35 years at Juilliard. I wouldn't mention my specialty in French Impressionist composers. I wouldn't talk about my work with auction houses or my private collection of rare scores. Instead, I became Ray the piano tuner. Not a total lie. I do tune pianos for fun. Keeps my hands on the keys, but it sure wasn't the whole truth. Griffin needed a father-in-law who wouldn't drag him back into music's orbit. So that's who I became. For 3 solid years, I watched him heal bit by bit, build his gallery, gain swagger in contemporary art, carve out a new life that didn't carry the unbearable weight of his sister's lost genius. But I also watched him turn into someone colder, someone who looked down on anyone he decided wasn't cultured enough. Tonight's opening at Meridian Contemporary in Soho was supposed to be different. Sarah begged me to come, swore Griffin was finally ready to connect. She even suggested I bring something meaningful, a real bridge between us. That's when I remembered the manuscript. I'd bought it 5 years earlier at an estate sale in Connecticut. Old Mrs. Chen was liquidating her late husband's collection. Mostly standard stuff. Signed programs, vintage LPs, printed scores. But tucked in a dusty box was pure gold, an unpublished Debussy piece. Rêverie pour Sophie, dated 1844. Authentication took 2 years and $12,000. Bibliothèque. National de France verified paper and ink. Sotheby's gave the $890,000 appraisal. The Debussy Foundation matched the handwriting to known samples. I'd planned to donate it to a museum. But when Sarah asked for something special, something that might help Griffin and me finally click, I thought maybe this is the moment. Maybe it's time to let Ray the piano tuner fade and Professor Cooper step forward. Big mistake. The gallery was packed with New York's art royalty. Polished concrete floors, track lights that cost more than trucks, air thick with money and perfume. I hung near the back in my old Navy cardigan and scuffed shoes, clutching the protective sleeve like a fool. Griffin spotted me, flashed his perfect dealer smile, charcoal suit cut like a blade. Flanked by heavy-hitter collectors I recognized from Art Forum. "Ray," he said, warm enough for public consumption. But I caught the tightness in his eyes. Blue-collar father-in-law at his big night? Not ideal. Sarah said you brought something for me. I handed over the sleeve. Through the clear plastic you could see creamy antique paper, brown ink, handwritten staves. Griffin took it like a host accepting a bottle of cheap wine. Sheet music. How thoughtful. Then it all went south. He held it up to the light and his face slid from polite to smirking. The crowd, assistants, bloggers, buyers, sensed blood and closed in. "Interesting," Griffin announced loud enough for everyone. "Where'd you pick this up, Ray?" "Estate sale in Connecticut." He nodded like that explained everything, shot his friends a knowing look. Estate sales. Gotta watch out. Tons of fakes out there." A woman in a $10,000 dress leaned in. "What kind of music?" "Classical, looks like," Griffin said, tilting it for her. Probably printed off the internet. You can download anything these days. If I shut up now, 3 things were guaranteed. Griffin would forever see me as the clueless old man who embarrassed him. Sarah would blame herself for pushing this reunion. Griffin would never grasp what he actually held, or how it tied straight to the sister he lost. Worst part? The crowd followed his lead like sheep. They weren't mean, just lazy, happy to let the expert tell them who to laugh at. "Paper feels modern," chirped a young assistant, dying to impress the boss. Griffin beamed. "Exactly. Real 1890 stock has specific aging. This is clearly new, laser-printed maybe?" The circle grew, collectors, journalists, staff, watching Griffin flex his expertise on my dime. "Authentic manuscripts come with provenance. Certificates, institutional letters," he lectured. "Not Office Depot sleeves." Laughter rippled. Then he made his fatal error. Maybe the champagne. Maybe the high of performing. Maybe 3 years of quiet resentment boiling over. Griffin switched to French, smirking to his inner circle. "My friends, this is precisely the problem with people like my father-in-law. They can't tell real art from cheap knockoffs." Sarah frowned. She doesn't speak French, but I caught every syllable. He kept going, voice dripping contempt. "Dad knows nothing about culture. Thinks scribbled notes from a yard sale are treasure. Look at him standing there like he discovered America." The crowd chuckled harder, feeding off his energy. Then a man I didn't know stepped forward, mid-50s. Sharp eyes, zero pretension. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Mind if I take a closer look?" Griffin hesitated. Of course, though fair warning, it's almost certainly a reproduction. The man, later introduced as Dr. Marcus Webb, Carnegie Hall regular, studied the page like a surgeon. "Notation is pure late 19th century French," he murmured. "Paper feels right. Ink bite looks authentic." Griffin's smile froze. "Well, whoever faked it did homework, but—" "Actually," Dr. Webb cut in, "this is period rag paper. You can feel the fiber layout. Ink settled exactly like iron gall on laid stock." The room shifted. Griffin was losing the narrative. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly?" Griffin asked, dealer mask slipping. "Marcus Webb. I play Carnegie. I've handled more original manuscripts than most museums." Griffin flushed. "Dr. Webb, I authenticate art professionally." "What documentation would satisfy you?" Webb asked calmly. Griffin rattled off like a textbook. "Provenance chain, B&F authentication, Sotheby's valuation, Debussy Foundation handwriting match." He spun back to me, voice syrupy. "Ray, any paperwork from the estate sale? Anything at all?" I could have ended it right there, pulled the folder from my jacket. 3 years of certificates. But I waited. Curious how far he'd dig his own grave. "I've got some stuff at home," I said mildly. Griffin's pity smirk returned. "I'm sure you have a certificate. Those are fakeable. Real ones need institutional backing." Dr. Webb was now studying my face, not the score. "What's the title?" he asked. Griffin glanced. "Claude Debussy, Rêverie pour Sophie, 1894. Webb's eyebrows shot up. "I've never seen that listed." "Exactly," Griffin crowed. "Because it doesn't exist." Webb shook his head. "Debussy wrote dozens of private pieces, gifts for pupils, friends. Many still untraced." Griffin's triumph cracked. The gallery owner, Elena Vasquez, appeared, looking worried. "Griffin, maybe take this private—" But he was in too deep. Reputation on the line. "No, Elena, this is educational. People need to spot fakes." He held the manuscript high again. "Perfect example of delusion. My father-in-law paid good money for a $20 printout." Then I spoke. "Griffin, you say real manuscripts need B&F, Sotheby's, Debussy Foundation?" "Yes." "And Debussy never wrote a Rêverie pour Sophie?" "Correct. Not in any catalog." "Interesting," I said, voice calm. "Because you seem awfully sure for a contemporary art dealer who avoids classical music like the plague." The room went dead quiet. Griffin blinked. "I keep broad knowledge of the market." "From where?" I asked. "Which professors? Which texts? Name the standard Debussy catalogs you're quoting." He floundered. "The comprehensive ones." Dr. Webb smiled faintly. "There is no comprehensive unpublished catalog. The Foundation's still compiling it. Been at it 40 years. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the thick folder, opened it slow. BNF letterhead. Sotheby's valuation. Debussy Foundation seal. Griffin went ghost white. Authentication certificate BNF 2024-0847. I read. Sotheby's appraisal March 2024. Handwriting verification. Debussy Foundation. All present. Dr. Webb took the folder, flipped pages, eyes widening. These are legit. This is the real thing. Elena read over his shoulder, gasped. Professor Cooper? Juilliard's Raymond Cooper? You guest lectured my seminar at Columbia. Whispers exploded. The name clicked for half the room. Griffin stared like I'd grown a second head. You're a Juilliard professor? Was 35 years. But your van says piano tuner. I tune pianos because I love the instruments. Hobby, not job. The crowd flipped. Griffin's expert takedown now looked like a tantrum, but something darker flashed in his eyes. Recognition. Because if I was Professor Raymond Cooper, French Impressionist expert, I would have known Sophie. Griffin tried to rally. This still doesn't add up. Why hide it? Why lie to your own daughter? Sarah looked gut-punched. Hey, Dad, you told me you just worked with pianos. I never lied, I said. I do work with pianos. Semantics, Griffin snapped. Why pretend to be working class? Why the dramatic reveal? He turned to the crowd, voice rising. Don't you find this bizarre? Retired professor plays humble tuner, then drops $1 million manuscript to humiliate me in my own gallery? Murmurs of agreement. He was spinning it back. And why classical music? He pressed. He knows I can't stand it. My sister died. He used my grief as a weapon. The room froze. Griffin played his trump card. Sophie was a music student. Her death wrecked our family. Professor Cooper knew that. Sarah told him. So what does he do? Brings the one thing guaranteed to trigger me. Lets me trash it, then destroys me publicly. That's not a gift. That's revenge. Tears in his eyes now, real ones. Crowd fully on his side. I looked at this young man I'd protected for 3 years, now convinced I'd betrayed him. Griffin, I said quietly, you're right about some things. His eyes lit with victory. I did hide my identity. I did reveal it tonight. I did know music hurts you. But you're wrong about why. He opened his mouth, nothing came out. I hid it because you needed me to. 3 years ago, you were broken. Sophie's death made music unbearable. You were rebuilding in art. Last thing you needed was a father-in-law. Dripping reminders of what you lost. The room was breathless. So I became safe old Ray, someone who wouldn't force Beethoven on you at Thanksgiving. Griffin's anger cracked. I watched you heal, I went on. Watched you build something new. But I also watched you turn hard. Tonight you mocked a gift for 20 minutes because you thought I was beneath you. He flinched like I'd slapped him. You used French thinking I wouldn't understand. You performed cruelty for laughs. Griffin whispered. I didn't mean... That's not the man who married my daughter, I said. That's not the brother who changed his whole life to escape Sophie's ghost. Dr. Webb asked softly, Professor, how did you know Sophie? Because I was there. Carnegie Hall, May 15, 2016, Rising Stars Showcase. Griffin collapsed into a chair. That was her last concert. I know. Sarah kept bragging about her boyfriend's genius sister. I wanted to hear what kind of music mattered to the guy stealing my daughter's heart. Griffin's hands shook. You came for Sophie. She played Chopin Ballad No. 1, Schumann Carnaval, and closed with Reverie pour Sophie. Don't... Griffin choked. I kept going. Afterward, I found her backstage. Midnight blue dress, silver buttons. She announced every piece herself, rare for students. Before the Debussy, she said, This piece was written for a Sophie over 100 years ago. Tonight I get to give her voice back. Griffin broke, sobbing openly in front of Manhattan's elite. Elena whispered, Professor, is this the same manuscript? No, but it's the same piece. Sophie's performance haunted me. I spent 2 years hunting the original. When I found it, I authenticated it because I needed to own the music she made immortal. Griffin looked up, wrecked. You bought it. Because of Sophie? I kept it safe until you were ready to remember her with joy, not just pain. He clutched the score like a lifeline. I'm not ready. I know that now, Dr. Webb said gently. Griffin, your sister may have been the only person ever to perform this publicly, Griffin whispered. I couldn't listen to her recordings after. Hurt too much. I knelt beside him. This isn't loss. This is what she achieved. He unfolded slowly. read Sophie's suicide note I'd carried since her parents gave me a copy. When he finished, peace flickered through the tears. "She mentions you," he said. "Says the professor who stayed to talk reminded her why she loved music." "Sophie reminded me," I answered. Griffin stood shaky. "Ray, I've been an asshole for 3 years. Tonight I humiliated you. I'm sorry. You owe me nothing." "I owe you everything." He turned to the room. "I just showed you everything wrong with gatekeeping culture. I mocked a man because he didn't fit my image. I was the ignorant one." Then he asked the question that changed everything. "Ray, will you teach me to play Sophie's piece?" 6 months later, I sat in their living room watching Griffin's fingers find the opening phrases of Rêverie pour Sophie. Still clumsy, but full of love. "Easy," I coached. Debussy wanted conversation, not concert. He adjusted, and the notes floated. Simple, true, healing. The manuscript hangs above the piano now, framed with every certificate, not for value, but for the story. Sarah and Griffin announced they're expecting. Girl, Sophie. Boy, Raymond. Sometimes love isn't loud. Sometimes it waits in the wings for years, wearing a cardigan and scuffed shoes, holding an $890,000 secret until the exact moment someone's ready to hear it. And sometimes the greatest revenge isn't humiliation, it's letting someone see who they could have been all along. If this hit you, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. You never know what quiet love the people around you are carrying.